Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I'm grateful for the opportunity to speak at the opening of this important regional conference hosted by the Caribbean Council on a bundle of critical issues touching and concerning the enhancement of regional trade and economic resilience in the Caribbean post-COVID. I congratulate the Caribbean Council on its ongoing work in engaging the Caribbean, Britain, and Europe in our respective people's interest. Your 20th anniversary is thus a cause for celebration and an occasion for reflection on the way forward. I note that my long-standing friend, Bruce Golding, former Prime Minister of Jamaica, and a critical reviewer of the structure and functioning of the Caribbean community, CARICOM, is also on the program. We were students in the Faculty of Social Sciences at the University of the West Indies, Mona, Jamaica, in the late 1960s. And of course, we were colleague prime ministers for a time. He left sooner. I've been around a little longer. Indeed, earlier this month, I was accorded my 5th successive 5-year mandate by the people of St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Perhaps on that account, Bruce Golding may have more interesting and provocative things to say. He's always thoughtful on the subjects at hand. By the way, as a matter of minor historical record, a 3rd individual graduated from the University of the West Indies, Jamaica in the same year, 1969, as Bruce and me. His name was Patrick Manning, the late Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago. I always remember Patrick, especially on these occasions. He was a towering advocate of and activist for a deeper and broader integration of the Caribbean. This discussion which we are having is really about a quest for socioeconomic transformation and resilience. And for over 300 years since colonial settlement, our Caribbean has had the contours of its economy and society defined by one dominant agricultural crop: sugar, cotton, arrowroot, bananas, whatever the crop, or by one dominant replacement: oil, bauxite, tourism. For most of those years, the model of sustained underdevelopment was underpinned by unlimited supplies of cheap labor and buttressed by preferential trading arrangements for agricultural commodities with Britain and/or supported by subsidies at home. The unlimited supplies of cheap labor were grounded in the enslavement of African bodies, the indentureship of Portuguese persons from Madeira, Indians and Chinese, or low-wage labor of free men and women under a global regime of monopoly capitalism. Here and there, bit by bit, over the years, particularly since the 1950s, this historic model of underdevelopment was trimmed and amended at its edges by something called industrialization by invitation, a sort of carbon copy or mimicry of Operation Bootstrap, the model advocated in Puerto Rico. This illusion did not deliver the benefits foretold by its advocates. In any event, this industrialization by invitation, producing light manufacturing commodities, this model ran aground upon the shores of the North American Free Trade Area, NAFTA, and its amendments, which not even the palliative of the Caribbean Basin Initiative by the Americans was able to overcome this particular challenge from NAFTA, save and except in the case of a few selected exports of these light manufacturing products. As market preferences diminished to the point of extinction, Some Caribbean countries groped for economic oxygen above the suffocating weight of inherent small island limitations, the legacies of historic underdevelopment, and the contradictions within the contemporary global political economy. This desperate groping led many, including the smaller countries in the archipelago, to embrace the prospect of developing offshore finance centers and the associated mirage of selling the sacraments of nationhood, citizenship, and passports. The optional gig of creating viable offshore financial centers came into a head-on collision with two veritable horsemen of the apocalypse: the real threat of financing of terrorism, and this was advanced by the United States of America, and the thesis of harmful tax regime of these financial centers, as proclaimed by the Europeans. The associated mirage of selling citizenship and passports is unraveling before our very eyes on account of its co-dependence on international brigands in collusion with a variant of neoliberal ideologues and mindbenders from the discredited stables of the likes of Cambridge Analytica, armed with digital colonialism and a hunger for dirty coinage and a thirst for vainglory. I've had to confront the latter types in our recent epic electoral battle in our country, St. Vincent and Grenadines, in which the soul of nationhood was at stake against those who had no qualms about the sale of nationhood. Betwixt and between all of this is the dominance of declining petrochemical production in Trinidad and its prospective rise in Guyana. Bauxite in Jamaica and Guyana has had its exhaustive day. In tourism, the leisure industry generally is a constant, though riddled with multiple challenges, including, of course, what we have just seen with the global pandemic of COVID. So, from this sweep, which I've just provided historically, and the various options which had been pursued, none of them really sustainable. Where do we go from here? With or without COVID? In my view, our strategic economic quest is to build a modern, competitive, many-sided post-colonial economy, which is at once national, regional, and global. I repeat, in my view, our strategic economic quest is to build a modern, competitive, many-sided post-colonial economy, which is at once national, regional, and global. Each of these words is pregnant with real meaning and significance. Clearly, in the modern globalized economy, the thesis of development with unlimited supplies of cheap labor, buttressed by market preferences or subsidies, had to give way, and gave way compellingly to a new framework, a developmental framework, a genuine one, not with unlimited supplies of cheap labor, but with unlimited supplies of knowledge and skills. This model, this new framework, this strategic vision for the economy demands, among other things, a thoroughgoing education revolution and hard and smart work across multiple economic sectors amidst one or more major sectoral offerings. But we just have to stop this search for unsustainable mirages, because this is what we have been having. Socioeconomic transformation demands sustained competitive endeavors in the national, regional, and global marketplaces. Once we accept that, the other subjects under discussion fall in place in a technical manner and with supportive political will. The specific policies and programs within, for example, the frame of the CARICOM Single Market and Economy, the CSME, and the Organization of Eastern Caribbean States Economic Union are available. And this conference highlights several of them: agriculture, fisheries, and food supply, marine transportation, air transport and civil aviation, the application of science and technology to the production process, including ICT, and tourism, including regional tourism, and in our countries, yachting, not just overnight stays in hotels and cruise tourism, but also very critically yachting. But there are other critical areas: renewable energy, as we have been searching for, both in respect of geothermal and solar, the blue and green economy. St. Vincent and the Grenadines, we are 150 square miles, but we have over 100 times that size. In our seascape, we are about 11,000 plus nautical square miles of sea. A big area for development is cultural industries, and we have to address in a more efficacious manner banking and finance, the existential matter of climate change, the management of natural disasters, and of course, global pandemics. And very critically, we have to promote from our region globally as intrinsic to the global economy, the global political economy, the question, the matter, the subject of small island exceptionalism, not in the traditional sense of special and differential treatment for vulnerable small islands, but the acceptance that there's a category for small islands within the global political economy, which ought not to be dealt with marginally, which ought not to be dealt with episodically, which ought not to be dealt with in a discretionary manner, but have a central place within the architecture of global economic and political relations. Simply because there's so many of these small island nations, and things must not be seen in relation to them as optional or in fact discretionary, but there must be certain obligations within the frame of the international political economy. Now, this notion of small island exceptionalism has certainly led St. Vincent and the Grenadines to become the smallest country ever to sit on the Security Council of the United Nations, and we are there now for a 2-year stint. We have this year is our first year, next year is our second year. COVID-19 has ravaged our region's economies like nothing else in living memory. Worse than the hurricanes, worse than the matter of the global economic depression, because it's very difficult until we get the vaccine to see the end game. And some countries, the devastation is just huge, where revenues have declined in the region of 40%, where negative growth between 4 and nearly 20%. In the case of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, we are a bit of an outlier in respect of the revenues, in the sense that peculiarly our revenues have gone up to the end of October this year compared to last year by 5.5%. And our economy has declined or is targeted to decline in the region of about 4%, which is bad, but not as bad as those which are going in numbers close to 20%. Now, what's going to happen in the next year for us basically to cover life as we know it, civilized life and living, is itself a matter in which we are engaged with our international institutions, international financial institutions. But the point is this: the strategic quest has to reassert itself rather than just a holding operation. Part of the reason in St. Vincent and the Grenadines why we have held lives and livelihoods together, it is because of the way in which we are transforming our economy, not with mirages, but in a real sense, and putting a lot of emphasis on agriculture and fisheries and services, including tourism, but in a more sustainable way. And of course, because we didn't lock down from day one, we had restrictions. And therefore, it allowed us to have some sense of normalcy to the extent that a small island within the face of a global pandemic can have this kind of normalcy. So I end with this. We have had several different models of development offered. What I'm suggesting is that each of them, to one degree or another, has had profound limitations. And there's a tendency now to go for mirages, for illusions. And some can be sold to an unsuspecting public very glibly, not properly thought out. They're not going to go anywhere. They'll lead you to a dead end, or worse, to a disaster, as in the case of selling passport and selling citizenship as a way towards economic development. What we have to do is to train our people well, have abundant knowledge and skills, and have detailed policies and programs of a practical nature within the broad strategic frame of building a modern, competitive, many-sided, post-colonial economy, which is at once national, regional, and global. And regional there meaning deepening the Caribbean single market and economy and the regional linkages in our economies. Thank you very much, and I wish your conference all the success.